And we're live. I bet if I went back and looked at all of our YouTube broadcasts, every one of them starts out with something like, and we're live.
Probably.
Probably. Okay, I think we're ready to get the show on the road. What do you guys think? Now that we're live.
Sounds good to me.
I'm going to play that intro music.
Don't we make that decision before we go live?
I think we do.
Okay.
Welcome to the Iron Sysadmin podcast, your source for IT news, commentary, and a healthy dose of paranoia. And that's it. We're officially live. Welcome to Iron Sysadmin podcast episode 45. I'm your host, Nate, and tonight I am joined by Charles. Say hi, Charles. And Jason. Dustin has decided not to join us tonight. Who? Yeah, he's dead to us. You know, if you keep filling up your shelves, Jason, with stuff, we won't be able to tell the wall is pink anymore.
Yeah, it's not pink.
I mean, it's almost to the ceiling.
Kind of looks like a Lafayette red. I mean, that's not pink.
I mean, it really
totally
hasn't
pink.
gained anything. You know, I haven't been putting it there. I've been putting it elsewhere.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, now you know. If you cover it up, I won't have that joke anymore.
Yeah, well, the hope is to replace it with actual like decent looking shelves that'll look less cluttered.
Oh, but then you have to take all the stuff off the shelves.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work.
You see why it hasn't happened yet.
It's a lot of work. I mean, you could also paint
is.
the wall, and then I wouldn't have the joke anymore. You could make it like purple.
No, that's even more work if I paint the wall. But
okay, so we're going to try to keep this quick tonight, folks, because Jason has an upgrade to do. And we're going to try to get through the show. Well, I don't know. At this point, that's like 45 minutes away. Half an hour away, isn't it? No, you said 8:15, didn't you?
yeah, we got about an hour.
We got an hour. We can do this. All right. So
We got this.
Our first article is from Ars Technica. Have you guys heard that, like, California's burning?
Again?
Yeah.
Again, it seems to be a yearly occurrence. There's mudslides and then there's fires. Maybe in that order, maybe not. You know, they just kind of happen. So this is an interesting article. It's, I would argue, up for debate as to whether it's really outrage worthy or not. But apparently, a fire department or county fire, I guess that's more than just a fire department, but county fire. I guess they use Verizon on mobile devices, and they are complaining at this point that Verizon's throttling of their mobile devices is actively impeding their ability to respond to the emergency fires in California. They're claiming that this is a reason to bring back net neutrality. I don't know about you guys, but I seem to remember that even when net neutrality was in effect, Verizon was still throttling their mobile data. So
Yeah,
I failed to see how this is related.
This feels like a I don't know what net neutrality is.
Yeah.
As opposed to an actual issue.
Yeah, when I first saw the article, I assumed that they were talking about like Verizon internet service on like DSL or something. And then when I started reading the article, I realized, no, they're talking about mobile data, which I don't know if that applies.
Yeah, they've got like this mobile command center, and then they have this device they use for coordination. But yeah, it's mobile. It's not, you know, it would never have been in scope of net neutrality, and they described previous throttling before the rules change took effect. Kind of a weird thing about the timeline. I wish ours had gone into a little more detail about this. Is that the current throttling incident, if you read it, actually starts in June, but you know the big Mendocino fire is toward the end of July. It sounds like it was throttling. They were trying to get it fixed. Like, hey, we're not supposed to be throttled. We thought this was fixed. And it goes back and forth. And I mean, there's clearly some kind of miscommunication going on here. parties are not on the same page. And then
Right.
as the problem keeps not getting fixed, eventually also there's a fire, and obviously we're exceeding the expected amount of data usage because it's a fire. But I mean, it's not like Uber surge pricing during an emergency or something. I mean, it's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah, right. It sounds like this is really just par for the course. Verizon's doing the thing that Verizon always does. They're not doing it because of the fire. They're not doing it to put the fire department in a bad situation. They're just doing what they do. It sounds, I think, like there was supposed to be an agreement in place where this particular device would not be throttled, but we all know how that can easily be misconfigured at one end or the other.
So
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with them throttling. I mean, given it's the fire department, there should be something in place that says like, we're not going to throttle because lives are at stake here.
Mm-hmm.
But from a net neutrality perspective, net neutrality covers the general idea is blocking access to certain content for arbitrary reasons or because you have a competing content. So this would be Comcast blocking access or slowing down access to Netflix because they have their own streaming service.
Right.
If this is caps across the board where they're being throttled because they've gone over a certain data cap, that's not a net neutrality issue. Never has been.
I'm not sure if that's an accurate representation of what net neutrality was supposed to protect us against. That's what everybody was afraid. Was afraid that ISPs would use the things that net neutrality protected against for. They assumed that cable companies would do shady things to prevent streaming services because it's a conflict of interest, or because that's how they could convince you. That's right. That's how they could convince you to buy their cable services, by throttling Netflix or whatever. I think really at its core, net neutrality was simply you have to treat all the data the same. That's where the name came from, right? So I guess in this case, Verizon is treating all the data the same. It's just that in this case, they're treating the fire company the same as they would Joe Schmo, and it's impeding the fire company's ability to coordinate their efforts.
Yes. Google tells me net neutrality is the principle that internet service providers should enable access to all content and applications regardless of the source and without favoring or blocking particular products or websites.
Right.
Which is I think, basically what the two of us have just said.
Yeah.
I guess.
And it seems like, I mean, there may be some shenanigans with the contract. I mean, it's not really quite clear to me. It sounds like they might have been on a truly unlimited plan. Then at some point we're on more of a, unlimited to a point, but then caps set in.
Right. Unlimited surrounding in quotation marks.
I mean, it seems like, given the multiple throttling incidents, that clearly the fire department didn't have a plan that met their actual usage. Yeah.
Yeah. And it honestly, if I were the fire department, I would be looking for a different provider, not complaining that the provider is not. I mean, if they're providing what they're paying for, right, and that's insufficient, then they need to pay for a different plan, or they need to go to a different provider, not raise it in court as a net neutrality problem. Now, if indeed this is the fire company thought they were paying for truly unlimited with no caps, and Verizon capped them anyway, that's a different case. And
so there is a solution suggested here in the comments. It's actually a pretty good one. I'll go ahead and read this. Why, yes, Verizon, your corporate headquarters do pay municipal taxes, and that does, of course, include unlimited removal of sewage from your building. However, we've determined that you have exceeded your acceptable limit of sewage removal, and we have therefore stopped all outflow from your building. We can, of course, clear the lines, but it'll cost you 10 times your tax rate in order for us to do so, unless you choose to wait until the next tax year before flushing your toilets.
That's funny. What's even funnier is that I've used similar analogies to describe net neutrality to folks that don't quite get it. I usually don't use sewage. I use water lines. But
well, of
okay.
course, in this analogy, who are the big data users in this analogy? Because 25 gigs a month is a shitload of cellular data. I use 2. Now, I am not an emergency command vehicle for the fire department, but if you're pumping out that much waste per month, in addition to a massive sewer bill, you might actually find yourself talking to the municipality about just what you're doing, and maybe you're going to be on a corporate. You're going to have to upgrade your service because you're allegedly a resident, but you're apparently, well, you're I don't know.
But I mean, that's a perfect example, right? So if I happen to use my sewer system more than the average person, I just pay more, right? That's how that works. It's metered, and I'm billed accordingly. In this case, if the fire department just simply wants to pay for that 25 gigabytes of data on their mobile plan, then they should be allowed to do so. Why does Verizon have to cap that? Why does Verizon have to throttle that? They're paying for a service.
So just to, I mean, I know 25 gigs sounds like it's a lot. It sounds like this is a almost like a hub device.
Yeah.
It's a single device that lots and lots of people are going through. So in that case, 25 gig is like probably next to nothing.
Right. So that's what I'm saying is, like, Nate, you got a business line for your house, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason for that. You're not residential given scope of usage and what you're doing.
Exactly.
I think the problem here is there's a lot of miscommunication. Some of that Verizon's fault for not communicating with the fire department about what they're not making fire department understand what their plan actually entitled them to, but like realizing that the plan that they're on is not really suitable for what they're looking to do with it.
Yeah.
And they're gonna
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Verizon saying that their plans are unlimited is confusing, even though in the small type at the bottom it says the first 25 gigs can go as fast as it wants, and then we're going to throttle you to like next to nothing. I mean, they said unlimited. I don't,
The point is,
I moved off Verizon for a reason, but
yeah. So like the thing that Charles is poking at is that I could have a residential cable modem, and I could try to make it do the stuff that I do on my commercial cable modem, which is run servers and run services out of my basement. And I did that for years before I ever had the money to be able to afford a commercial modem, right? And there's hoops you have to jump through and whatever. But I wouldn't then call my ISP when, they put something in place that prevented me from doing the thing that I wasn't supposed to be doing on my residential modem. In this case, if the fire company is doing something out of the norm, right? They should be on a different plan, or they should be paying differently for it. If it's really just that they went and they bought a standard data SIM card, never went to Verizon and said, hey, we need a special level of service to make this happen, and Verizon never communicated to them that this could be a problem, then this is the exact miscommunication that Charles is pointing at, right?
No, yeah, but according to the article, they purchased a government contract plan specifically for this.
Okay.
It sounds like, and Verizon isn't the only one that does this. AT&T does this, and so does T-Mobile, where they make this wonderful claim. Matter of fact, your former as well, company did this as well, where they make the claim that it's unlimited.
Right.
In big, huge, blazing letters with a tiny little star next to it.
Until you hit your limit.
Right.
It's unlimited until you hit the limit.
Right. But they don't say that out loud. It's written in small text at the bottom that you need, a magnifying to stare through the second magnifying glass. And I think that's sort of the point. They thought they had purchased what they needed. They hadn't. They called Verizon and said, shit. And Verizon was like, sure, just shower us with money and we'll be more than happy to give you more stuff.
Right.
Oh, man. Got a responsibility to read that contract. Like, if you're relying on this for emergency communication, you read the contract.
Yeah.
You read what it says.
Yep. I think there's screw ups on both sides.
Yeah.
But I mean, to to link this to, we're going to dredge net neutrality into this in court, which is really what the article is. That's one of the things that the article calls out. I don't know that there's a case there. I don't know that it ties into net neutrality at all.
Yeah, the net neutrality thing, I would say it doesn't tie into it at all.
I think that's more or less like, oh, net neutrality is a hot button item. We're going to try to link that to our thing.
I mean, politically it makes sense, but strictly speaking, I think they're at best parallel issues.
Right. All right, so I think we've beaten that horse. What's next?
So moving on to the next horse.
The next horse we can do, which is
a company you can trust, of course. Facebook.
Oh, right.
Remember, I don't know, it was a couple months ago, and they started kicking all these companies off their platform that were sucking up all the data and using it for
this was
whatever.
The Cambridge Analytica thing was the one that came to the forefront.
Yeah. So they changed their name, and I can't remember what it's called. I don't think it's the same company, but it could be.
I think this is a different company.
Yeah, this is a different company. Because this article references Cambridge Analytica as though it's a different entity.
Right.
By the way, this comes from Fast Company. I'm trying to make sure that people who author articles get their credit.
Well, that's just the company that published the article.
Okay, the
author is Mr. Alex Pasternak.
Pasternak. That's another awesome name.
Yeah. So Crimson Hexagon apparently got booted off of Facebook. Verizon got booted off of Facebook a while ago.
That's a company from a Bond movie. I'm sorry, that has to be a company from a Bond
or is that the thing that the Department of Transportation puts at all the intersections? Oh, that's a Crimson Octagon. Never mind.
Yeah. So anyway.
Okay, sorry for derailing.
They got booted off of Facebook a while ago, and they've kissed and made up. I'm sure that everybody is very concerned about this, but it's okay. Crimson Hexagon is back in business. The fire hose has been re-enabled, and
see references to Russia in here because you can't have a good article nowadays without Russia.
Yeah, they're getting all the datas again. So,
oh, good. Have they promised to not do whatever terrible misdeeds they did before again?
Probably.
It only collects publicly available social media data anyone can access. Says,
oh, good.
Yeah.
And yes, Russia is mentioned in this article as well as Turkey, but it's okay. They're just clients.
I like Turkey,
and it's a Russian nonprofit tied to the Kremlin. So, but nonprofits are inherently non-evil, so it should be fine.
What could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong with all of this?
The client list here is so we've got Adidas sneakers and other types of shoes. We've got Anheuser-Busch, so beer. We've got the Department of Homeland Security.
I mean, arguably beer.
So bullshit. We've got the State Department, more bullshit. And then you've got clients in Turkey and Russia, which, as we all know, because we've been spoon-fed this stuff, means terrorism and more terrorism.
I'm curious why the State Department is bullshit.
Because it's the State Department. It's still another government agency.
Okay.
Specifically, the State Department's Digital Anti-Terrorism Unit.
Oh, that's bullshit.
Oh, that makes more sense. See, the State Department is getting the same data that Turkey and Russia are getting, so that they can all collaborate together and make sure that
No. It's so they all have the same data and they can fight each other. Totally not a collaboration thing, right?
Wait, so this is like when you're an arms dealer and you sell to both sides?
That describes arms dealers.
Yeah, so I think
that's how you make money. You sell to people who buy your stuff.
Well, yeah. So I think you're doing
with
the same
impunity
thing here.
I mean, this just kind of points to the thing. Nate, the last time I was on the show, there was some article about, I think it was that company that was making like the child tracking app, and they had a massive data breach.
Yeah.
Remember that? And the thing we were talking about is that, in the absence of any kind of even baseline regulation on private data, it's like Facebook, it's just up to Facebook, who has the best internal processes. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, these guys aren't sketch after all. We're going to turn their stuff back on.
I can't think of anybody I would rather trust with my data than Facebook. I mean, they have it all anyway, so why not just trust them with it?
So
they've done well so far.
As you read more into this, they sort of start throwing Twitter in here too, and
yeah,
almost trying to equate what they've been doing with Facebook with what they're doing with Twitter, which I think is really funny, because Twitter is, unless you've turned your tweets to private, Twitter is 100% public.
Yep.
And then the Facebook was apparently investigating a claim that Crimson Hexagon had inadvertently accessed some private Instagram data.
Oh,
yeah, because so what?
Wait, how?
I know you guys are you like a sysadmin and developer-y types, and like what you don't understand is that when it comes to security, it's up to Crimson to make sure they're not accessing the private stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
It's totally not up to Facebook and Instagram to prevent that.
How do you accidentally access data you're not supposed to have access to? That's not supposed to happen. That's not the way these are supposed to be designed.
Well, you access the data, you say whoops, and then you put it into your algorithms anyway.
Oopsie. Well, they let me have it, so I must be allowed to use it, right?
Well, that would be my take on it would be, oh, I can get the data. It must not be private.
Right. It must be data I'm allowed to have. Otherwise, it should have stopped me from getting it. Right.
The API gave it to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If you've been, I'm sure somebody will bring up the open door analogy, but if you've been given access to an API that has non-public components, I mean, that's being given a house key.
Yeah, this isn't an open door question. This isn't like, oh, my front door was open and somebody walked in and stole my TV. This is, I gave somebody a house key, and then I got mad when they walked through the front door.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, but it's like, yeah.
Or I got mad when they went in the fridge, or I don't know, something. Find some way to.
Yeah.
What actually bothers me about this isn't so like, look, Crimson Hexagon is doing exactly what Crimson Hexagon is going to do. They're collecting the data, they're figuring out ways to monetize that data, and they're selling it. And a couple of the different things that they have listed in here is anti-terrorism. Okay. I'm sure we can get behind anti-terrorism and stopping terrorists. But then they also mentioned things where, police were allegedly using this to spy on local Black Lives Matter people. Or, that they're using it to spy on this group or that group. And it
so here's the thing. You have to qualify the word spy. Okay.
Okay. Monitor, look at, get the data from, like, whatever you want to call it.
Right. So
my problem is that what people don't understand is or don't seem to understand is that when you're on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or any of these companies, how much money are you paying to be on this? Oh, that's right. You don't. Well, they have to make money, right?
Right.
And you've given them your data freely. By the way,
I guarantee, and you accepted an agreement.
Right. I haven't read those agreements because I don't.
Nobody else has either.
But I guarantee that those agreements. Matter of fact, Instagram's agreement, at least used to have a note in there that said that any pictures that you put up there are now the property of Instagram.
Right.
So you've given that data to them. They can do whatever they want with it. And then you have people that jump up and down about free speech. Well, sorry, private company doesn't apply.
Yeah, it's not free speech.
So
not protected
these companies
as free
are doing exactly what you would expect these companies to do. They're monetizing the data you give them. And the fact that people want to buy it for nefarious purposes is not overly surprising. And the only way to stop it is to stop using the services.
Good luck with that.
Facebook will change their tune drastically if you stop using other services.
When all the users go away, they'll change their tune, but it's not going to happen.
No, understood. But
if every tech savvy person in the world all at once decided we're not going to use Facebook anymore, they would still have millions of people to farm data from.
Yeah, but you don't have to be tech savvy to understand this.
Yeah, but
I feel like
still a privacy issue.
We're the only ones that care.
True. Well, partially true. I mean,
yeah.
You know, I know non-tech savvy people who are concerned about this and who don't use certain services because of it. But
still, though, I mean,
if this is what you're signing up for.
If every one of them left Facebook, I think Facebook would still have an enormous pool of users. And I mean, I don't know. I guess I'd have to see how many users they actually have, and get an actual like decent number around that. But I just get the feeling that there are plenty of people who absolutely don't care. And they use Facebook. They don't understand what they're giving away.
Yep.
And that's it. They don't care.
Right.
They're there to share pictures of their food or whatever it is that they want to do.
You have to give them a reasonable alternative.
Yeah. And
Mastodon is not a reasonable alternative.
Right. I was just going to say, as much as I love the concept of decentralized social networking where you get to own your own data, it's never going to catch on. And Jason, you remember me talking about this, I'm sure, when Diaspora first showed up. I was excited about Diaspora. I'm like, oh, awesome. I'm going to start my own pod. And then as soon as I started doing that, I'm like, I'm never going to get anyone to use this because it was difficult for me to set up and to pull people away from the social media networks that are so easy to just put an app on your phone and give them your data and log in and see all your friends. It's just not going to happen.
Right. Yeah. I would love to jump to Mastodon, or I don't know that I really care about Diaspora, but maybe. But
it's just an example of that was the one that I got behind, and it's still around, but it never really went anywhere.
My reasoning is the same reason that I run my own mail server. I like running my own services. Email's easy. Email is, I don't have to have an email server specific to somebody else's. Nobody's logging into my server except me. It works by intercommunicating with everything else. But you don't have that with Twitter. You don't have that with Facebook, right? So unless that existed because the company wanted it to exist, it's not going to happen. And of course, Twitter and Facebook are not going to go, hey guys, here's the new API so you can link in and, we can make this a big federation of various different Facebook types.
There was that nice couple of years when you could log into Facebook, what became Facebook Messenger, with Jabber.
Yep.
That was great because that meant I could stay out of that, but I just had Facebook added as a chat client. And God, I guess it was Pigeon.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, but
so
we don't use that anymore. Now we use Slack.
Yeah. The Diaspora has like a connector for Facebook that you could use Diaspora as like your hub of information, and it could share out to Facebook. If somebody came up with a privately run social network or a I lost the word, decentralized social network that could do that you could share data you chose to share out to other social networks, that might work. But the integrations coming back are the hard part, right? Like Facebook would then have to tie back to your Diaspora, your Diaspora.
Right. And you always have that problem of like, so that's you specifically connecting to between your Diaspora and Facebook.
Right.
Just for you. So does everybody do that? Or do you set up some sort of weird protocol where you're a quote hub and you post a bunch of metadata, including your posts? Like it gets complicated and ugly.
Yep.
I mean, honestly, I'm keeping in touch with people basically two ways at this point: Slack and group text messaging. And the latter is awkward as hell, but after a while, everybody's got everybody else's phone number, and it works.
The thing with Slack is it has sort of the same problem, doesn't it? All your chat data is owned by the people who run Slack.
Yeah.
All they'd have to do is decide that they're going to start selling that data.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, to date, as far as I know, they don't mine that data or sell that data.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they won't.
I mean, I'm putting on my paranoid hat here, but it's not impossible for them to change their terms of service, and anyone who doesn't jump ship when they do it, that data is theirs.
Right.
So I think Slack, as opposed to say Twitter or Facebook, has a simpler and more obvious revenue stream.
Yeah, they actually charge for their service. So it's not likely they're going to start selling your data.
Like they accept the free riders, the various free teams, knowing that they probably create a lot of converts who can then separately advocate for paid services.
Right.
But I mean, given that Facebook and Twitter are out there, do you think you could ever get a paid service that does what Twitter or Facebook does? I don't think people would ever move to it.
We had it before they existed.
And we moved away from it.
We had paid communities, right, in like BBSs and then AOL and CompuServe and stuff like that. They AOL were all for-play models.
AOL is probably the nearest equivalent in terms of mass adoption.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, we moved away from that. Social networking became free, and you were now the product. Not the product. Yeah, the product, I guess.
Yep, you're the product. Sell all your datas.
Yep. Maybe I should just like have a conscious stream of things into text files, and then I'll just sell the text files to people. Cut out the middleman.
So speaking of sell all your datas.
Or are we moving on to the next article now? We probably should.
That was a transition, Nate. I know you've been doing this podcasting thing for a short period of time.
They're tricky transitions. They really are.
How much?
There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
That's my transition noise.
Nice. So, how much do you think Social Security number costs these days? If you were to market and buy one.
I know now that I read this article.
Yeah, but what would you have thought before that read the article?
It's much lower than I expected, which I'm sure is where you're going. I expected Social Security numbers to actually be a premium. However, I've thought for a long time that the Social Security number is not really the end-all, be-all identifying factor that we all make it out to be. Yeah, you don't want someone to get a hold of it easily.
Right.
But there's a lot of other pieces that tie to that before it's really all that useful. Like just having someone's Social Security number isn't the keys to the kingdom.
Right. Yeah. So with a social, you can sign up for credit cards and you can do certain things.
Well, a social and a name.
Yep.
Like you have to tie that to a person. I can't just like have a number and not the person, or I can't have just the person and not a number. I need both.
Yeah.
Which isn't that hard to tie.
That's very much the path to identity theft. The other things that they have listed here are actually pretty interesting. So driver's license, which is just fake IDs. So yeah, fake IDs kind of been around forever.
Yeah.
Credit card information, again, yeah, you can still credit card numbers. People can use it and then buy things, and again, relatively low cost. I mean, everything we're talking about here is like under $20. But then it gets like more information that I wouldn't think would be anything that people would really be after, and it would be that expensive. Banking information sort of borderline.
Yeah. I would have expected banking information to be of a higher value.
Maybe. I don't know that there's honestly, I don't know that there's a ton that you can do with it, because banks are pretty good at preventing that sort of stuff.
What, are you kidding me? If I have a routing number and an account number, can't I just pretty much suck all the data, all the money out of an account?
And once they figure it out, the bank can just reverse it. So it's easy to track. Like there's a lot of stuff that's.
Well, I mean, I would think a smart criminal would suck the data or suck the money over to their own account and then withdraw it or move it to a different account.
Well, no, you get multiple bank accounts. You suck all the data into one of the stolen bank accounts and you withdraw it from that one. Not that I have any. I mean, I just made that up on the fly.
Just made that up on the fly. But that's what I mean, though. So sure, the victim will probably get their money back out of FDIC insurance, but the bad guy still made off with the money.
Right.
It's like back in the Diablo days when you would dupe items, except you're duping money.
Wait, I understand it now. So so then the one that, and I've been hearing this for a while, and I haven't been able to wrap my head around this. Healthcare information. Your medical records are really, really valuable.
Yeah, I don't necessarily understand why.
When's the last time you did like a medical procedure?
I have to say that I've been pretty lucky in life, and I haven't had many of them. So yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I mean, they know everything about me. They know where I live. They've probably got my payment information, contact information. If you needed to, steal my identity to do something, I mean,
so it's not.
My doctor has everything.
It's not necessarily because it's medical data. It's just because of the treasure trove of data that it is.
It's everything.
What they're saying here, what they're saying here is they're actually using those medical records so that the thieves can get healthcare services.
Really?
Yeah.
So they steal your identity to get health care?
Yeah.
Healthcare is a valuable thing, man.
Yeah. Look, I mean, criminals get sick too.
I mean, think about it. We've got a mutual friend who had a somewhat significant injury, and he broke his ankle, and he told me what the actual total cost of his services was compared to what he actually had to pay because he has a healthcare plan. And screw hitting up a bank, man. I mean, that's a valuable thing if you happen to need a medical procedure.
Yeah. Right. So sell somebody's identity so they can go pretend to be them and get something expensive covered under someone else's insurance. And then they never have to pay for it. Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
And then the highest cost item they have here is passport information, which sort of makes sense. I mean, that's not the easiest thing in the world to get a hold of.
Well, it's not only not easy to get a hold of, it lets you pretend you're a citizen of a certain nation.
Yeah, and I can't imagine it's easy to forge a passport either.
Right. I mean, I could see that being valuable to criminals and terrorists because, they may be on some sort of a do not fly or do not enter the country list, and now they can move around using someone else's passport. So, yeah, I could see why that would be. There's the market for people that would be looking for that kind of thing is probably people who have the money to pay for it, and it's hard to come across.
Yeah, so don't post pictures of your passports and credit cards and stuff online.
Try not to. Yeah. Try not to do that. Hey, look, I got my passport. Yay, here's a picture of it.
All right.
Next. Purple Steve.
Purple Steve. So I found this. This is just it was just cool looking. There's
Listen, any astral phenomenon named Steve deserves.
Yeah. It looks like an aurora. It's not, apparently.
It's a Steve.
It's a Steve. They named it. They literally named this thing Steve, which apparently is an acronym for
I didn't even notice.
Strong thermal emission velocity enhancement.
I thought they just liked the name Steve.
Yeah, so did I. It's kind of a mouthful, but it's some sort of light phenomena that you can capture on film, and it's pretty cool. So scientists have no idea.
Yeah, there's even
like, this is neat. Figure out what this is.
There's even a picture of it in the article.
Yep.
And it's called Steve.
Yep. And if you had some more time, you could have played a clip. She didn't find it, did you? I'm disappointed.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Anyway.
Moving on.
Go read about Steve. Steve is purple.
All right. Movie reference number 2.
Obsolescence.
Yes. Out mode. So all that stuff that you learned to get a job and do things.
Yeah, believe it or not, that changes and has to be kept up to date. Weird.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't really much of a surprise.
Yeah, right. Not. Go ahead. Speak about the article you linked, man.
Yeah. So, according to what they're saying is that I guess the data they have here is 65% of children who enter elementary school as early as 2016 will end up working at jobs that don't yet exist.
Yep, that seems reasonable. I don't think my job existed when I started school.
Yeah, and then they say, and that's more or less the same if you graduated in 2016. So turns out, I know this is a surprise, the job market is evolving, and jobs that didn't exist yesterday exist today, and it'll continue moving forward that way. So this is more of a kind of keep learning, don't stop learning type article.
Yeah, I think that's the sort of thing that we advocate for anyway, right?
Yeah. So it's more or less why I sort of put it in here. And they give some goofy ideas on what you should do. Think outside the box, hone your social skills, showcase your talents, learn to apply your hard skills to real life scenarios, and realize that your onlyness is invaluable. Whatever.
I'm not sure what onlyness is.
I'm still waiting for my love of trains to have relevance in my work life, but there we go.
Well, you're obviously just working the wrong job, Charles. Your love of trains would make more sense if you were a train historian.
Conductor.
Oh, I could never work in the industry. Hours are horrific.
Wait, didn't you just defeated your own statement there? I wish my love of trains was a job.
Wait.
Oh, I can't work in that job.
No, I said it'd be relevant, not the.
He could be a network engineer because he can route.
But yeah, no, doesn't.
No,
not the same.
I tried.
Unless while he's routing, he goes choo choo.
That's a pretty good way to get beat up in your workplace, I think.
It would. It would be a great way to get beat up in your workplace.
That would be hysterical.
Maybe. So stay relevant, folks, and figure out what onlyness is, and like trains. Wait, maybe the trains.
That's the key. That's the key takeaway.
Yes, you should like trains. All right, that covers the news. So take that. Okay, I don't know that we have much in the way of announcements tonight. There's nothing in the notes. There is one interesting thing that I set up last time we recorded, and I don't think we talked about. I've set up a page on Iron Sysadmin, so ironsysadmin.com/live, which each time we... sorry, I was distracted by the chat on YouTube. You guys should go and watch us live on YouTube so that you can be involved in the chat. Anyway, each time we start our Hangout, which is how we broadcast to YouTube, I've been putting the link in a page on ironsysadmin.com so that you can watch us live right from ironsysadmin.com/live. And that'll keep the most recent episode will be available there until the next time we record. So anybody who doesn't want to go and find our channel on YouTube and do it that way, you can now do it through ironsysadmin.com. So I don't know. It's not that earth-shattering, but it's just a new thing that I've set up. And if I don't tell anybody about it, no one will know it's there, and there's no reason to have it, right?
There's always a reason.
Yeah.
All right.
Into the notes now.
Notes.
And I guess the only other thing to announce is that, I think, what is it, next week? Or the week after? The next DEF CON 610 meetup.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 weeks from now. Yes, but we won't be recording that night because of the new schedule.
Wait, yeah, we will.
You look confused.
What new schedule? I'm confused.
The new schedule that we're recording this show on.
Right. So 2 weeks from tonight is...
Yeah. 2 weeks tonight is September 5th. That is not a show night. The 12th and the 26th are show nights of September.
Oh.
Because it's the second and fourth week of every month. Wednesday.
I pay attention. I do.
Although it does seem... Huh, is August not? Ah, I see. August has more than 4 Wednesdays, which is why it's confusing. Right. Anyway, calendars are difficult, folks.
Dates.
I think it's all the announcements. Dates, calendars. Yes.
Dates.
So, I think it was last week. I have my Google Home set up to play me a certain subset of short news podcasts in the morning. As anyone who has an Amazon Echo or Google Home is probably familiar with, you can just basically say, give me some news, and it gives you some news. And it played one, I think the channel that I'm subscribed to is like NPR Technology. But there's another show called 1A, the1a.org. I don't know what it stands for. Probably like First Amendment, maybe. And they had a show that they had broadcast on NPR Technology about how the World Health Organization has now classified gaming addiction as an actual addiction.
Who?
And they had a real... Huh?
I said who?
Yes, the Who. The Who did it. It was actually a pretty interesting show about... They wrestle with the question of, is this really addiction or not? They have a bunch of experts on where they talk about it. I guess the way they describe it, like when we all think of addiction, we think of like physical addiction. We think of drug addiction and whatnot. And this isn't a physical addiction. It's more like a willpower addiction. Like, I can't help but to sit down and play video games. Right? So I thought it was an interesting show. And I only linked it because originally I was going to talk about it in the news, and then realized that the article that I linked isn't really an article at all. It's just a link to the show, and neither of you had a chance to listen to the show. So whatever. If anybody's looking for an interesting talk about gaming addiction, you should go check it out. It's in the chat section of the show notes. Sorry, I was just waiting for Jason to chime in about how gaming addiction isn't a thing.
I promised myself I wouldn't do it. I don't know. Addiction's a tricky beast.
Yeah, that it is.
I don't know. There's those that say there is no such thing as addiction for anything, and there's those that say that addiction is just, a learned behavior. It's a tricky subject.
So, I mean, I guess in this case, you could say that it is. A gaming addiction could be just a behavioral thing. But I don't know. So they went into how gaming triggers certain endorphins in your brain, right? And you can absolutely be addicted to a rush of endorphins. That's a physical addiction. Like, it can be a physical addiction. It's just like any other drug, except it's not a controlled substance. It's a thing that's in your body that can be released. So, I don't know. It's I thought it was an interesting thing. It was enough that the World Health Organization, which I apparently have trouble saying, added it to their list of actual documented types of addiction.
I wish I had time to be addicted to video games.
Yeah, right.
So many games I'm behind on.
Indeed.
That's the thing. If you had a video game addiction, you would have the time, even though you didn't.
Yes, that's the point, right?
You could be like my friends who didn't finish college.
Yeah, see that?
City of Heroes, all day, all night.
What were they playing?
City of Heroes.
City of Heroes. Wow, really?
Yeah, it was like back in like 2003, 2004.
Yeah, right. That's about when that was around.
They couldn't think of a better game to get addicted to?
City of Heroes, yeah.
I don't know, man. What do you want? I don't think World of Warcraft is out yet.
I was addicted to EverQuest back in the day.
Yeah,
I don't know about addicted. I played a lot of EverQuest. So anyway, I think that there's another link here that one of you added.
I threw that in. The developers of GoldenEye and the N64 have weighed in and said using Oddjob and multiplayer is cheating. That seems pretty important and relevant to have that argument settled.
Oh, well, good. Having never played GoldenEye, which maybe I shouldn't admit in front of mixed company, I don't even know what that refers to.
I think we should just move on and save you from further embarrassment.
I was a Shadows of the Empire player on the N64.
I've played the game, but I don't know the controversy. I feel
there was a feeling that Oddjob was overpowered, in part because he was so hard to hit because he was so short.
Completely makes sense.
Yes.
Right.
I knew plenty of people who had house rules, no playing Oddjob.
Nice.
So Oddjob was a character you could play, and he was short in stature, and he was harder to hit. This makes sense. It's like, I'm going to play as a Smurf, so the Smurf is harder to hit because he's tiny. Yeah, this makes sense. Okay. Moving on then, I suppose. We're going to get into our main topic. Let me find that soundbite again. I think we're about to have a war in the chat on the on YouTube because someone is now Greenzilla says Counter-Strike for the win. So go argue about games.
Counter-Strike's a solid game.
Yeah, it was a solid game.
Yeah, right. So anyway, in the main topic tonight, I thought we would chat a bit about something that's very relevant that's going on in my life and to some extent Jason's life at the moment, preparing for a project. And this directly comes out of the fact that Hack Your Derby is being controlled by Jason, Dustin, and I at DerbyCon this year. And we haven't done a lot of work to make that happen because we were waiting on it to be accepted. And now it's accepted, and the conference is just a little over a month away.
Oops.
So we need to pretty quickly get everything together, which involves not just getting the contest Hack Your Derby together, but we're also rolling Hack My Derby into the contest, which is, fortuitous for me, who's always wanted to have more to Hack My Derby. Yeah, so basically we're working on getting stuff organized, or I don't know, I feel like I'm working on getting stuff organized because you and Dustin are so busy. So I just thought we'd go over, things like favorite tools, where to start, how to properly scope a project, how to stick within your boundaries, how to not go overboard and scope creep and whatnot. And it's perfect that Charles has made it to the show tonight because he's sort of our resident project stickler, if you want to call it that, around the office. So, yeah. I've always found it really useful. I mean, I'm more of a doer than a planner. Anyone who's ever worked with me will probably know that. Charles, you can start shaking your head now.
Taken as given.
But I always, when I'm working on a project, I always grab for a tool to help me get the job done. And there are many project management tools out there. And that's probably getting the process out of order. Like Charles, I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit about how you should properly scope a project?
Yeah, I mean, let's throw out an idea and go from there. I mean, for a lot of the projects, so I'm a web developer who does some Sysadmin stuff on the side, and I often find that, like, I very rarely get into a situation that's completely new. And so the first thing that I have to do is I'm drafting a project. I have to understand what's already been done. Like if I'm building something, what's already been built. I mean, am I going to have to migrate? Are there existing expectations about the service? And I have to go through this discovery process so I actually understand what I'm building on before I even can start describing what I'm going to do. And that can actually be quite painful. You go into this discovery process and you don't even necessarily know who you need to talk to. It could be that the people who would actually know the answers to your questions are gone. They could be no longer with the company. I have no joke, had a project where the person who knew what I needed to know was dead.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tough to get answers that way.
It was, and it's actually biting me in the ass right now. There are situations where the documentation is either non-existent or in different places, and so it started this whole wrangling process. Because if you don't start that way, you're building on sand, and you'll discover in a year that, hey, those were great questions I should have asked before I actually got committed and did a thing.
Right. So I know we had a lot of discussion internally about how to properly scope and exclude things from scope, basically to help prevent a project from basically going off the rails, and scope creep, which is like a bad word around our office anymore.
Which is good. Yeah, and that's where the discovery process is helpful because it gives you a sense of people's expectations, like what they like. You can find out when you're going to do a project what people think that project might be about, and then you head it off at the pass as you're doing, statement of work or scope, and you're describing we're going to do X, and Y, and we become aware that you all might think A, B, C, D, E, and F are part of this project, and they are explicitly not. And we are stating up front, that we're not going to do those things. You try to narrow it down as much as possible, because otherwise you have this very amorphous project description, and you're going to find yourself repeatedly being asked to do things during the project that you didn't plan on, you didn't have in your timeline, definitely didn't have in your budget, and then you never actually get the project done, and it just lingers forever.
And this is just as important for internal projects, which is basically the scope we're talking about, as it is for external projects. Like, say you're a consultant and you're trying to write up a statement of work. It's very important to write up exactly what you're going to be doing and what is included and what is not. Otherwise, you'll be on site and the client will start saying, hey, while you're here, what about this? Or what about this thing that is somehow loosely related to the thing that I'm paying you to work on? And then you end up getting involved in things that you didn't bargain for, maybe don't know enough about, and you could even put yourself in legal trouble in that particular circumstance. So it's good to have a nice, well-defined statement of work or project scope, using the lingo that we use internally. So once you have a project laid out, I guess then it's probably a good point to plan out how the project should unfold. And this is probably the point where you'd want to reach for a tool to document all of that and organize it in, tasks and milestones and whatnot. Charles, do you have any preferred tools for that sort of work?
Preferred? No. We've used so many at this point. I mean, it's. I like Redmine well enough. It has its limitations, but just for like simple issue tracking and organization, Redmine works pretty well. Where it breaks down is like, Redmine's basically an issue tracker that has like project management type stuff.
Yeah.
But, if you start experimenting with, say, if you really go full agile and you start experimenting with Kanban, you find that Redmine doesn't quite meet your needs anymore. And getting that top level view, like, I feel like for 6 years we've been chasing this question that we still can't answer, which is, how much time does our team have available every week? How busy is everybody? And what are they working on?
Right.
And that's an incredibly complex question. And I think we keep hoping that there's some tool out there that will actually bring that information all to the surface so that we can see it. Because we've played with, Redmine we've played with Smartsheet. A couple of us are piloting Asana right now to see if maybe it can meet our needs.
Look,
Jason's laughing.
he must have had some experience with it.
Yeah, Asana was horrible.
So Jason, I know you're probably getting close to out of time because of the upgrade you said you have to do tonight. Do you have any input? I know since you and I last worked together, you've moved into a role where you're probably managing more projects than maybe you did when we last worked together. Did you come across any good tools that you like to use for these sort of things?
Honestly, any one of these tools will do it. The tool of choice, because I work with a bunch of people who've been in the industry for a while, and it's just sort of been beaten into their heads, is Jira. Personally, I'm not a big fan, but whatever. And this whole, personally, I don't think this whole idea of being able to push a button and see where all your resources are and how many hours you're doing things and be able to like make all these crazy calculations, it's just not going to happen. I think that's the holy grail that nobody's ever actually found.
But I mean, you can see how that sort of data would be useful for someone who's either managing a project or someone who's managing people who are managing projects.
Yeah, but it's unrealistic because you're assuming a perfect world, right? So how long is it going to take to develop this website? Well, based on our estimates, it's going to take 20 hours. Well, what happens when you run into a snag and you're at 40 hours? Right? Like,
well,
all your data that you had is wrong now.
But if it's all properly tracked, then you can tell that that particular task went over, and you can get a better handle of maybe why.
Yes, you can. But I don't know that necessarily helps you for predicting when the next time you're going to have a snag is.
So I was talking to a guy at a conference this weekend, and he told me something interesting. At least I thought it was interesting. Is that they did some time tracking, but what they actually really measured was how many tasks they completed in a week.
Yes, agile.
Yes. He was preaching the agile text, but I like that because it deals with that problem of what do you do about blow-ups. If you have a reasonable metric for how many tasks you do in a week, presumably they account for the interrupts.
Right.
Yes, so and no. It depends on what you consider a task, right? So
they don't. Yeah, they capped no task could be estimated at more than 4 hours.
Okay, so but what happens when you miscalculate and you have a task that actually takes more than 4 hours?
Well, don't do that too often, or it's going to throw off your metrics. I mean, right.
So there's
that will happen.
Yeah. So I mean, having done agile a little bit now for a little while, it's not bad. I like it a lot better than I like the waterfall method of, build the perfect thing and take a year and
right.
And in a year you find out that the customers no longer want it. Or
that you did something wrong at the beginning.
Yeah. So write something and iterate like mad, which is essentially what agile is I think perfectly viable. But I feel that people, they get too caught up in trying to track and predict and get the perfect metrics are sort of missing the point. As long as you're moving forward, and as long as you're moving forward with a pace that the company is happy with, I don't think it's that big a deal.
Yeah, and I feel like we're kind of slouching toward that realization. I mean, like I said, we've been doing, just our internal development group has been doing Kanban for about 2 months at this point, and we're noticing some changes in our workflow. So at some point we're going to have to digitize it, because right now it's just a bunch of note cards up on the boss's wall.
Yeah, have you tried Trello instead of the sticky notes?
That's probably next. We will have tried every project management tool by the time this is over.
Well, no, I mean, Trello is exactly what you have on his wall. Having seen Trello myself and having seen what's on his wall, it's the exact thing. It's the exact, except instead of sticky notes, you have cards that are movable.
Right.
So from the I guess the lead agile evangelist that we have, he will tell you in no uncertain terms, there is no electronic replacement for sticky notes on a wall, period. So what we end up doing is we do the sticky notes on the wall, and then our delivery managers are responsible for making sure that the Jira tickets are updated accordingly.
Right.
So, which is mostly just moving them to the right position. But
yeah, I'd be curious to know why Trello is not equivalent to sticky notes on a wall. Is it like some tactile thing that he's obsessed with?
Nah,
it's literally the same thing.
Sticky notes on a wall are always there. It's always in your face.
Right.
I mean, I have to tell you, when we, when Ken, literally filled his wall with all the tasks that we thought we were doing, we all stood back and were like, holy shit, that's a lot of stuff. Like, the physical reality of it was overwhelming. And like, hey, and look how much of that's signed to him and to him. And it's like, we got to do something, because we're screwed. This won't work.
It's the magnitude of having it up on the wall. A sticky note is a fairly decent size. You can't put a ton of information on it, and there's this, I guess, this tactile feedback of, you know, moving a sticky note from position to position and finally being able to tear that up, throw it away. I guess, I don't know. I don't, you know, I see them on the wall. I'm not involved in the development process directly, but you know, I know that the developers and the you know, the people that are involved in it seem to love these up on the wall, where they won't do anything with the electronic tools.
So Charles, I have to ask, when you guys turned your tasks into physical sticky notes, how granular did you make that? Like, did you?
Not enough.
Yeah.
And that's something we started revisiting, because, like, you know, there's one sticky note on there that's basically an entire project. You know, like a 20-hour project. And like, this is stupid. It's never going to come off.
So when I started using Trello for my own internal stuff, and this is basically just so I could better keep track of my own tasks at work. So it's easy for me to have something slip out of my memory. So I need to write it down or have it somewhere where I can easily reference it. I got tasks, like I have one of my boards in Trello is basically, these are things I expect to be working on any given day. I call it on deck, right? And I have tasks on there that have been there for weeks because they're really involved or they're really time consuming. So I struggle with, you know, how granular should that be? Like, if I have a task that is, you know, upgrade the thing, and the thing involves a dozen servers, should it instead be upgrade the dozen servers one card at a time?
It would give you a more measurable sense of actually getting the task done.
Right.
Yeah, because at this point, I look at that single card that, you know, amounts to, you know, it's some amorphous amount of work. I say 20 hours. It might actually be 10, but I just look at it, and I don't even remember where I am in that project at this point. I can find out, but it's daunting to look at it. But if I actually sat down, like, okay, it's actually just do the sequence of things, I'd actually probably knock it out pretty quickly. It would be down into digestible chunks.
So on the subject of tools, I was just recently turned on to this new tool that I just heard of called Notion. I don't know if I know Jason and I had talked to you about it briefly. It's Notion.so is their website. Notion.io is not them. That's something else.
So Notion.so?
Notion.so. Notion.so. And it was, there was a discussion on Twitter about what people were using for note-taking. And personally, I use Google Keep for that, just because it's nicely integrated into my Android device. I was using Evernote for a long time, but when they changed their pay plans, I left them and went to Google Keep. Someone said that Notion is a great alternative because it's more than just notes. It could be just notes. You just take a bunch of notes with it, and that's it. But there's like templates you can apply to each note, and each note can be anything from like a spreadsheet to a Kanban board to like a little database to, I mean, a wiki. There's all kinds of interesting integrations here. There is a free tier. It's got some limitations on it, which I haven't hit yet because I'm not doing anything substantial with it. But yeah, it's for pay if you want to really do anything really crazy with it. But it looked.
Can I take my notes in Markdown?
I don't know. I haven't tried that yet. Maybe. Is that a thing you like to do?
Yes.
Good. Then maybe you can.
I also like to version my notes in Git, so I'm probably weird.
Yeah, well, I mean, to each their own. You are a developer in that sense, so Git is sort of your home, right?
Yeah.
So,
this is interesting. I think I'm going to play around with this because you know what I needed in my life was another project management tool.
Yeah, so I started tinkering with this for Hack My Derby, but then we decided to just use the issue tracker that's built into Jason's GitLab system. because it's already there and it's already integrated with the Git repositories that we're using to store code anyway. So why not, right?
We've considered using GitLab's issue features more heavily. The problem we run into is that not everything we do is development work, and it's like, well, some of the tasks can live in there, but not all of them. And there was pushback in certain quarters to using it. And admittedly, for actual straight project management, it would be a real problem.
Yeah, I don't think that it would. It's fine for I have to do a thing, so I'm going to make an issue. And that's really easily tied into the Git repositories in GitLab. And then, of course, you can do branches and whatnot based on your issues. The way I handled it for this very small scale thing was I made a repository, which I just called general, and you can tie issues to that. And if we ever have, like, I don't know, documents or something that we want to tie to the project, they'll go into that repository. So it's not a bad way to handle it, but it's probably not the best way either.
Yeah, for something that scale, it's going to be fine.
Yeah. Okay, so we've beaten tools up for a bit. I guess really the next thing is to leverage the tools and to actually get the project done. And this is a difficult thing to really just put into like a how-to per se, because every project is going to be a little different. But it's going to come down to time management, and it's going to come down to prioritization, right?
Yeah, and this is where this is something of an unsolved problem, at least like just from my perspective. Like, okay, so let's say you have like a 20-hour project, but the people like like, okay, we said, all right, we've spitballed in, there's like 20 hours of work in here, but the problem is you've got, say, 4 people working on the project, and even if you just estimate, say each one of them has 5 hours of work, but then you have to line up each of those 5 hours, and all of a sudden this is a 20-hour project that will take 2 months because of task sequencing and availability,
right?
And just keeping everybody on task. And it's not that anybody's going to like deliberately ignore the work they have to do, but they got a lot of stuff to do, and you know the particular thing you're working on might not be the most important thing for them.
Yeah, this is the problem I run into myself all the time. I mean, as a sysadmin, I just have a lot of things to do, whether they're just like quick operational things like, oh, that server's disk is getting full, I'm going to have to go deal with that, to, you know, oh, why didn't I get that email? Is it stuck in the spam filter? To like honest to goodness project work that's going to literally take up brain space for half the day, right? It's hard to leverage, it's hard to prioritize and get that stuff done, because the operational stuff feels like it's more important because it's incidental, right? It's someone has come to my desk and said, I need you to do a thing, or someone has called me or submitted a ticket that says, I need you to get this thing done. And there's a certain level of urgency to that because there's a person tied directly to it, where overarching broader project work, while it may be beneficial in the future, doesn't have the direct impact that second, right? So
I mean, like, here's a perfect example. Friday morning, there's a whole bunch of stuff I had lined up that I was going to work on.
Yep.
And then it was brought to my attention that there was potentially a problem with the server that I manage. And, you know, I had to spend good 40 minutes investigating to determine, well, it's not what we thought, but it's suboptimal. And, you know, by the time the incident response was done, I'd basically blown most of my morning. And like the technical debt I'd uncovered turned into basically 2 days worth of work.
Ugh.
But I built some great tools. Now I
well,
didn't
at least there's
do
that.
it, huh?
At least there's that.
There's that, and I'll be releasing those tools, so you know people will benefit. But that's a perfect example of why I'm now 2 days behind on a bunch of stuff.
Right. Because something stole your attention. And
I could have just put it on the back burner, but this is an issue I'd actually first encountered 4 years ago and put on the back burner. And I'm like, how much longer am I going to let this go?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have that problem with lots of upcoming work you know, the sort of thing where it's I don't know, I'm trying to think of a nice example that's not too specific. You know, I've got this thing where I can maintain the status quo, or I can make it better. And making it better might mean a little bit more work right now, or I can just kick the can down the road and maintain, right? And then maybe 5 years from now, when I don't know, warranties expire or whatever, I'm in the boat where I can make the same choice again, right? And it's really easy to make that choice to just say, well, let's just buy another one to replace the one we have because now that one's obsolete. And in 5 years, maybe we'll do something more awesome, right? Mm-hmm. At what point do you draw the line and say, we're going to do that more awesome thing now, and we're going to benefit from it in the next 5 years? Or, you know, maybe we'll save money or, you know, whatever. Or operationally, you know, save some time.
I mean, there's the old XKCD rule. You know, you figure out how much time you're going to save versus how much time you put in to fix the problem. I mean, like, I had a nice, so we have this, there's one process that we basically do once or twice a year, but it's a real pain in the ass. It's very time consuming. And last year when we were asked to do this particular thing, I said, this is stupid. We hate doing this. And I built a tool. This year, we got asked to do that thing again. And I used the tool. Already documented, in place, and, you know, job was done in like 2 minutes.
Done.
Like, damn, what else? What am I doing next? You know?
Yeah, right. Right.
So I checked my notes. I built that tool literally 1 calendar year ago.
Yeah, that's very similar to what I see when I'm, well, the benefits I've seen and when I started automating system builds. Mm-hmm. So it used to be, you know, someone asked for a server, and it would take me half a day to handcraft that server. And finally, I decided, all right, we're going to start leveraging Puppet. And
now
as we
it
started
takes
looking
half
at
a day to plead and beg with Satellite.
Yeah, right. So when we started leveraging Puppet, we needed something to manage Puppet. And at the time, Satellite 6 was not out yet, but I knew what it was coming, and I knew it was based on this project called Catello, which had a Puppet manager in it, Puppet Master built into it. So I started looking at Catello, and I spent, God, it might have been 2 weeks getting a build environment put together, getting some Puppet classes written to do our basic build stuff. And I mean, it was a pretty, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for here, but it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work to get all the pieces working together so that I could go from, I have an empty virtual machine that I put in the proper network and I define it in Catello and I press the power button on the VM and it boots from Pixie and it gets a basic operating system laid down, and then the operating system gets configured, and then when it's done, it's ready for me to just move to the proper network, and I have a server. It took a lot to make that work. But since then, I have probably saved countless hours, assuming that all the tools work right. I know you're going to jab at my Satellite. No. But assuming all the tools work right, which most of the time they do, it's just that when they don't, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, you remember when I did that deep dive on getting the GitLab CI deployment stuff working a couple of years ago. You know, we're doing automated deployments to our WordPress environments multiple times a day at this point. It's just push button. It's revolutionary for us. I mean, where we've come with that, and that was a lot of work. It has absolutely paid off.
Right. Right. I mean, really the same idea. So, I mean, try to sort of get us back on point here. So that's the importance of service improvement projects, I guess, is probably a good way to go with that. The last thing that I thought would be useful to talk about is, at what point do you finally just call a project done? And this really harkens back to all the things that we've already talked about, right? So if you've defined a scope properly, the project is done when all the things in the scope can be checked off, right? So if you didn't write a good scope, how do you call a project done?
Yeah, and that's the real thing, is that, I can go back into the archives and I can find all kinds of that they're littered with projects that are basically done in the sense that no one is working on them and no one will. Hang on, I've just been informed that Surge is back. We're gonna have to cut off this conversation. That's much more important. No, that essentially it's done because nobody's working on it. Nobody intends to work on it. But yeah, it was never called done, and it is functionally incomplete.
Right.
In the sense that, maybe the communications piece was never even thought of. Like, users weren't told it was done.
Right.
There are some products we've had that have basically been in a soft launch pilot for years, and they've kind of slithered into becoming production systems, but without the mission accomplished banner or something, no real sort of fanfare or go live. They're
Right.
not documented, and at some point there's going to have to be some sort of discovery reclamation project to upgrade them.
Right.
And yeah, it's defining a project well enough that you can actually declare it well and truly done with confidence. That's hard.
Yeah. I mean,
something we've started doing, and this is probably only relevant if you're part of an in-house team. As we've been doing projects, we've ensured that part of the project, usually at the beginning, but definitely at the end of the project, is to say, and this project will be managed, this project now that is being operationalized, this thing will be managed by this team and they will be responsible for it. And
right.
It's not just like amorphously, it belongs to this department or this department. No, it belongs to this service team. They are responsible for the feed and care of it. They are responsible for establishing metrics to determine for the care and feeding of the service. It's like we just launched a new help website for the college, and we're actually establishing, this cross-departmental service team to manage it, to ensure that we don't want essentially to manage the next redesign of the help site, because this is just doing theme layer cleanup, but not addressing some of the bigger structural problems. Like, we have to pay off the technical debt first. We've done that. Now, if we wanted to maybe have a knowledge-based solution, we have to empower a group of people to make those decisions, which means somebody has to own it going forward.
Right.
That might be one way to ensure that a project actually gets done, but it's hard.
Yeah. I mean, I can think back to just a few years ago. We would have a lot of initiatives that you could possibly call projects, but they were more like, Nate has an idea about a thing. I mean, actually, this is where Satellite came from. This is where Catello came from. It was Nate saw a problem and tried to solve it, and the solution worked, so it turned into a production service, right? And while in that particular scenario, it worked out okay, but none of the things you were just talking about were ever defined. It was just more or less Nate's pet project to get servers built. Right. Now, that eventually turned into something a little more formal when Red Hat released Satellite 6, and it incorporated all the work that I had done. But there were a lot of other things where someone had a good idea and they put some work into it, and it sort of turned into a zombie where maybe that person was using it, maybe they weren't, maybe a small subset of the employees were using it. No one really owned it. Maybe the person that had built it eventually left the organization, and now someone else had to figure out how to run the thing because there were people depending on it. And it's really a place you don't want to be, right?
Yeah,
and
you run into that. I mean, be very wary of any scoped project that says it's a pilot. Because there, in addition to the usual caveats about what this project is and what it isn't, if it's a pilot, you need to have some very explicit language, and this is when the pilot is over.
Right.
And these are the decisions that get taken when the pilot is over.
Right. Whether that's a date or a goal you've met or whatever, there needs to be something that says when you do this, the project, the pilot comes to an end.
And then we either stand this up as an actual full-blown production service as part of a new project, or we turn it off.
Right.
And there you run into a problem because it's very hard to turn something off at the end of a pilot.
Right. Especially if there's a mixed opinion as to whether it was successful or not. right? So your pilot users, you may have a dozen pilot users, and 5 of them loved it and 7 of them hated it. And those 7 say, we have the majority, turn it off. And the other 5 are like, no, I've incorporated this into my daily work. You can't turn it off. I love this thing. And now you've got politics in the way.
Yeah, and so that's where you want maybe it's like when you're doing website analytics, you determine what your questions are. Before you even look at the data, it's like, well, what questions are we trying to answer? Like, are we trying to grow page views by a certain amount? Like, what are we trying to accomplish? So if the pilot, you say, we're going to agree going in what the metrics are, and like what would constitute a successful pilot, and that means some really involved questions of your stakeholders about what are we actually trying to accomplish? What's the purpose of doing this?
Right.
And those are hard conversations, but they're easier to have at the beginning of the project than at the end, when the subtext of those conversations would be we're possibly trying to take away the thing that you've been using.
Right. All right, so I think that covers the subject pretty well. You have any other thoughts you want to throw in there, or do you think we got it?
I mean, project management is and certainly feels like a lot of overhead, but I mean, especially at the beginning, it can't be, you're doing a project, you just want to start playing, right?
Yeah.
You want to build a thing.
Yep.
And project manager steps in and says, okay, but before you build a thing, fill out these forms. And you're like, oh crap, I mean, I just wanted to do something. But
Yeah.
as you say, you
I
do
just
it.
had an idea that I wanted to execute. Yeah.
And play with that idea. Don't worry about it. But as soon as it starts getting serious, all right, take a step back and write some stuff down. Figure out, okay, if this is a real thing, we're going to do this, then what are our goals? What's this going to look like? If this thing I'm playing with, we actually turned and built something or used this or deployed this or whatever in production, what should that look like? Like, what should it look like if we actually did it and it's working? And what would people expect it to do? What's it look like when we're done? And how are we going to get from here to there? Who's going to need to be involved? What do we need to buy? What do we need to build? How much time is it going to take? Who all does this affect? Actually just start thinking.
Right.
Because otherwise, you're going to start tackling each one of those problems as it comes up during the during the project, and it's going to feel never-ending, and you're going to get really dispirited. I mean, you don't have to go full waterfall on this, where you're kind of building out this massive project plan and everything, but just figure out, what does this touch? What does this involve?
Right. I can say that having lived through both eras at the organization we work at the college, it was nice to be able to, like, on a Friday afternoon, say, I heard about this cool new technology. I'm going to go try to build it. And then maybe that becomes something useful and it starts getting used. And it was just like a fun thing to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But after seeing so many of those things happen and turn into these zombie projects like I referred to before, I can say that the project management process, while it was a lot of work to try to figure out, and it puts a lot of front-loaded, like, what feels like bureaucracy around the cool thing you wanted to do, I can certainly see the value in it, because it gives you the ability to better define the thing that you're trying to build, figure out when it's done, figure out if you can turn it off or when you should turn it off or give up on the project, right? It puts some confines around this very amorphous thing, and that's actually valuable. You're probably, by spending the time, you're probably saving just as much or more time in the end.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, being the sort of guy who likes to just dive into something, the fact that I can say I see value in this, that should mean something to you guys.
Well, it was a process for all of us, just to get on board with that and start figuring how to work with the system and how to make it benefit us and to some extent protect us from ourselves and from from clients, so that we can say at the outset, this is how much we're going to do.
Right.
This is what we're going to build.
All right, so I think we're going to call it a wrap for tonight. A couple people joined us in the YouTube chat. I encourage folks to watch us live on YouTube on the second and fourth Wednesday of every month. It's usually a good time. There was some chat about automation and SCCM and packaging and whatnot in the chat while we were going. Sorry if we couldn't give that enough focus. We have a show to record at the same time. I encourage anybody who wants that sort of discussion to join our Slack team. You go to ironsysadmin.com/Slack. I think that URL works now. If not, just go to ironsysadmin.com and there's a menu in there that'll get you to Slack. There's a permanent invite link on there that you can join the Slack team, and then we can chat there. Lots of folks in the in Slack that have lots of answers to lots of things. So, oh, it looks like the guy who was asking questions just joined. Awesome. So welcome to the Slack team. We'll certainly have a chance to chat later. Yeah, find us on the socials, on Facebook and Twitter, mostly. Iron Sysadmin in both places. Yeah, I think that covers most of the awesome things. Oh, if you like our show and you want to help contribute, you can do so monetarily via Patreon. And we appreciate everyone who does so. Patreon.com/IronSysAdmin. We've lost a couple patrons. That's okay. But it's nice to know that anybody is willing to pay us to do this thing. Mostly that's going into paying for the podcast hosting, which is really just like the show itself is hosted on S3, which means that there's transfer and data fees and whatnot. So yeah, I think that's it. We're going to call it a night. Jason had to cut out early, so he won't be able to say goodnight to you folks, but Charles and I are both still here. So we'll see you guys in, I guess it's 3 weeks at this point. Mm-hmm. So good night, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in live.
Not all.
For a moment, I had trouble finding the right thing on the soundboard. I need to color code these or something.
I'm looking at I've been looking at myself, for the last hour and a half, and like, damn, I shouldn't have skipped shaving today.
Yeah, I don't think anybody cares. All right, so folks, we're gonna turn off the broadcast. Thanks for watching live, and anybody who's watching later, thanks for watching us on YouTube. Remember to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and you'll be notified when we go live. So thanks, everyone. Have a good night.